Menahot Daf Hey Amud Aleph, 5 lines down. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, he argues against Rav. Minhata Omer Shekmasah Shlush Makshirav. The Omer Minha, if you did Kimitah for the wrong reason, it's kasher. Ujara Edna, you don't need the remainder. Ad Shetavi Minhata Omer Achareh, but then unless you bring another Omer, and that will allow it to be mutar. How can you bring a new one if you can't eat it? Where it says Mimish Mimashke Yisrael in the feast of Bnei Israel, seemingly Minha Mutar Israel, anything that's mutar for Bnei Israel. So if you can't bring the first Omer flour, you can't offer it at all. Where it says Amar Kasavar Shakish Shakish holds and if it's if there's a problem with it being too early, but that day will be mutar later on, then it's not a problem at all. If since the first Omer will be mutar later on, it's okay. Matir Rav Ada Bered Rav Yitzhak, Yesh B'Avosh and Menahot. There are halachot that applies to bird korbanot that don't apply to minha. Yesh Menahot and B'Avot, something applies to minha but not birds. Yesh B'Avot, things that birds sheha alfot ba'in b'devat shnayim. Birds can be brought combined through to rebuild donation. Om Husrei Kavaram, birds can be brought those who need it as a korban. V'hutru Miklal Yisrael Mekodesh, and they also can be brought from the. They have a special procedure done to them like milika that cannot be used for regular slaughter for a regular person. These things do not apply to mincha. What do apply to menachot? They don't apply to afot. Menachot, they are not kli. The mincha needs a vessel, the kli sharet. Utnufan is way, v'agashan is yivat mutayach, v'yeshem b'tzibor yachid. There's community and private korbanot. Those things do not apply to bird. The Gemara says ve'emita, and if it's true that the flour of the first mincha is asur to be eaten, menachot na mishka hadash. Yatur mikal yisrael mukadish. I mentioned that case. Mine what will be that case? Mincha omer the omer mincha. Says no, Kevin, the end man since the status of that day is not as premature, is not let so that day it's not considered isur at all. It's already considered mutar because the eligible later on. Right, so it's not asur, it will be mutar, considered already mutar because it's gonna get fixed. Mativ Rav Sheshat. He had a question. Hekdim matan shemen matan dam. Someone if the Kohen did the oil part of the avodah before the blood. You should refill the oil. Yeah, so we tell do the oil after the blood. He did the oil application on the thumb and toe before he did the seven on the in the hechal. Refill it. Yeah, so we do that. Just do the toe and thumb before redoing before after they did the oil on the hechal. If you don't tell me that you don't hold this concept that you're able to reduce, you're able to do something if it's in Butan later on, how can you redo it? My dad whatever it is, they're already and should be done already. Shani halachot Misra is different. Diktiv behu haviyah because it mentions that it shall be. Amar Ketub says zot tihiyeh Torah hamsra. Tihiyeh, which means tihiyeh should be done either way. It doesn't have to be a certain order as long as it gets done. Okay, matir shakva. Someone did the hatat before the Asham. Another person should not stir the blood so it doesn't congeal. Let it sit there. But to say the bit and you should burn it. So if it's not, if it's gonna be kasher later on, why is it pasul now? The Gemara says, "Am I come out here above? What's his question?" He himself said, "Shani halachot Misra is different. Tiba yaveto." Or another is okay. The Gemara says, "This question is as follows: Ema hani min avodah." This statement about applying to an avodah korban shahita avodah doesn't apply to shahita because she does not consider it a slaughter avodah. V'in hasar zman b'yom. Now, if you hold that premature is not a problem for the same day, that's going to get fixed. Yeah, why can't someone else stir it? And then bring the Asham. Why is that asur for all day? Where it says, as follows. The Kasafar, he holds Mizrach Matir. He holds that even though the grain needs the Korban to be made mutar, if you don't do the grain and the next day arrives, the 16th day of Nisan happens, it makes it mutar. Therefore, they both say, I feel with bunch of can't even it existed. The next day, the sun rising made it mutar. So this halacha at the sunrise of the next day allowed it to become mutar is not written it outright. We infer it. Mishnah says, You can't bring minha bikurim or minha an animal of the new produce before the omer is brought. Now, heavy pasul, you bring it pasul. Kodem shtei alechem lo, you can't bring it before the two loaves that you're supposed to bring on that day. Mishum, the heavy kasher, we bring it to kasher. V'yamar Yitzhak, remember Yish Lakish, lo shana lebe'avar asar v'chamishat, it's only asur on the 14th and 15th day of Pesach of Nisan. Al shah asar on the 16th, and heavy kasher, it brings kasher. Allah Kasavari, Ibn Zahmatis, we see that the 16th day, the sunrise makes it mutar. Okay. Ramam Rabba says, Min hata Omer shek matzah shtos man kshira. Min ha Omer that we did kimitzan after I prepared kasher, usharel neachlin, you eat the extras. Gena siticha min hata Omer achad letira, you don't need another Omer min chad to make it mutar. Why? Because intention only makes changes when it's only for someone's able to do the avodah. Udvara ula avodah and something that's eligible for the avodah. Umakom to the avodah and something that's in a place eligible for the avodah. What does each one mean? B'mishar ula avodah would mean a person who's eligible. La'afu kohen ba'mu excludes a kohen with mum not eligible. Udvara avodah something fit for the avodah. La'afu min hada omer excludes the omer mincha. The law hazia is not fit for any other type of mincha tehdishu because that has barley and other ones don't. Umakum eligible place. Lafukin if gam is excluding a case when the was damaged. So we see from here that Rava would say that the wrong intention does not make the Omer pasul. Tirmanan. Kishu Omer when the pasuk already says minha bakar the mata. It says from the cattle in the pasuk. She'en tamul you don't need to mention this because the pasuk already mentioned from animals. Elelo tzit terefa excludes the case of terefa. In case the animal with a fatal flaw that you can't bring it as a korban. The Gemara says, "Baludina, why would I need a pasuk? I have a logic. A mum animal that's mutar for a regular person, a sura gavoa cannot be brought from his beach. Terefa, which is a sura for a regular person, and ninja sura gavoa. So kavachomer logically would for sure be a sura from his beach. Gemara says, I'll bring you a proof that logic is flawed. Why? Because halib, which is a sura for people, and blood is for people, shasun is a sura for regular people, but mutar gavoa is still in his beach. But you can't compare that. Halal and blood is never eligible for a person. You can't compare to Tefa, which is the entire animal's asur. And therefore it should not be asur for Mizbeach. The Gemara says, I'll bring you a proof from Milika, the bird procedure. The bird slaughtering from Milika is asur completely and it's asur for another person. We see it's mutar in the Bet Mikdash. Okay, so that 1 second. The reason why the Milika makes it a sur is because it's a holy procedure, and that's what that's for another person. Doesn't apply to if you want to tell me that the kava chomer is a problem, teach you excluding terefan. The problem is, why would you assume the kava chomer is flawed? We didn't give any reasons. Every reason we gave showed that the Kal V'Chomer is not flawed. Therefore, I'm obviously, you know what? Maybe why the Kal V'Chomer is flawed? Maybe the Omer Mincha proves that the Kal V'Chomer is flawed. Because Omer Mincha is a sword for another person, Mutar for God. That's different because the Omer Mincha has this hidush that it allows the new grain to be consumed. Okay, fine. Bishveit, Omer Mincha of Shemitah, but there is no new grain. The Gemara says Bishveit Nami, Shekim Mater Zechi Bishveit. It allows the new grain of the aftergrowth so that it should be easier. It says that the shvi'it, the aftergrowths are asur. Even if Bekiva doesn't make sense. The Omer Mincha, even though you can't use it in Israel, allows the grain outside Israel. Even according to Binahot that it's the new grain outside Israel is not the Raita, right? Which is the whole concept nowadays we hold outside Israel is this concept of whether or not Omer is Raita. Oh, Yeshan. It's coming to allow the flour itself to be mutar inside the minha. So again, what's the problem here? Is the case terefa should be brought, and let the terefa korban make the terefa mutar, just like that. And the Gemara says, you know what? You know what knock out the kava chomer? You can't bring a proof from Omer because that's the mitzvah is to bring the Omer for the new grain. That does not apply by Terefa. Next reason maybe the Kal Vachomer is knocked out. Resh Lakish Amar, Mishum Deikun Mimar Mefatem Maktoret Dachiach, bring a proof. Someone who creates the Ktoret will bring a proof. You can't create the Ktoret for the other person, but it's mutar for Mibbeach, for the Midrash. It's Mefatem Gabrahu. Person who's making the Torah is a person. It's not you can't compare it to an animal. No, not the person who's compounding it, the person who's creating it. The comment, the act of doing it proves it. The Gemara says, "Mal b'tum masor shekem mitzvah bekach." Again, it's a mitzvah, not a proof. Bring a proof that Shabbat knocks out the kavah chomer. Shas really doesn't tell the Gemara because it's a sword to do milacha on Shabbat for a regular person, but it's mutar for mizbeach. Gemara says, "Malach Shabbat sheken utra mikal imitzah job milah." Even Shabbat has exceptions regarding milah, milah on Shabbat. The Gemara says, "As to milah tzorech yidatu milah mitzvah it's a mitzvah." Gemara says, "Shabbat sheken mitzvah bekach." You can bring a proof from mitzvah on Shabbat because that is the mitzvah. Let's do it. Rabbi different proof. Bring a proof from Kilaim. Then after the Kavach Chomer. Slowly doesn't tell the Gabor because Kilaim is a sewer and a regular person, but it's mutar for the Beit HaMikdash, like the Kohanim's clothing. The one says, "Ma Kilaim sheken hu tefillah Kilaim es leidel b'sit." Kilaim also has an exception for the regular person for sit. Atu met sit mutzeh chediatu. It's not the ordinary person's need; it's a mitzvah. Ella, fine. Makilayim shem mitzvato bekach. That's the requirement. We're saying a little more time. Fifth try and knocking out the kal vachomer. Maybe we could, although we don't have a clear-cut reason, we could bring a common denominator. The kedusha comes from the process. The blood and the chelev knock that out because not part of the process. Can come from mutar that the animal is mutar, although the chelev and dam does not make that same distinction. It must be since each one has their own special characteristic. The common denominator, they're all mutar, asur for other person, mutar for God. We will bring it to as well. Even though it's asur for other person, it's mutar for Hashem. Therefore, we need the pasuk to knock out the kal vachomer. Mar says no. Same answer before. They all have another common denominator that there's no other way to bring these processes except over here. But there's never a requirement to bring it to the vow. No proof yet.